Who doesn't know the beliefs when it comes to the topic of how to adjust the cavesson to the head of my horse? On one hand, there is the two-finger rule, exactly 2 fingers below the zygomatic bone. One or another might say 3, which is already almost difficult again. Then the two-finger rule at the front of the nose. Should it be like this or like that? There is already another argument going on. The next thing is it has to be secured so that it doesn't slip. But isn't it actually the case that the skulls of our horses are very, very different? And isn't it actually the case that it might depend on the type of cavesson? That means, is it a cavesson that only has the noseband made of leather? Is it a cavesson like the one we are using here, which is very, very softly padded and has a small chain in it? Is it a cavesson made of metal, that thick metal that wraps around the horse's nose? Or is it a piece of metal like a serreta? What kind of cavesson is it? And depending on that, it might also be different how I adjust such a cavesson. Furthermore, it is also the case that we use the cavesson in very different ways. What can my horse do? What do I want to achieve with it? And what can I do? And now we will take a very detailed and comprehensive look at the fit of the cavesson. Initially, we briefly talked about the two-finger rule. Why does it actually exist? And where is it practical? And where is it not so practical? We had the two-finger rule, for instance, at the zygomatic bone of the horse. The zygomatic bone is located here. It is very prominent. And then we have the chewing muscles of the horse lying directly here. Then we have here, approximately in this area of the skull, a small hole, and above it, nerve pathways extend outward. That means this part here is particularly sensitive because there are many nerve strands present that then spread further down. So that means we need to be careful not to hit the tip of the zygomatic bone with our cavesson. So we need to make sure that we definitely feel this area is free. And we also need to be careful that the chewing muscles of the horse are not pinched. Now I have simply placed this cavesson on and fastened it. If we apply the two-finger rule here, we can see that it hangs just a little lower. In other words, if we apply the two-finger rule now, it could be positioned roughly up here. So, what you might be able to see is that the rear part here now lies directly on the chewing muscles because, for example, it has a chewing muscle that is very pronounced in the upper area. It becomes narrower or somewhat more tapered towards the bottom. This means that when I place the cavesson here at the top using the two-finger rule, I have pressure here. Therefore, I decided with this horse to say I will take it a little bit lower. Then I have space here. So it means that it's not just the two fingers at the zygomatic bone that are interesting, but also how much space I have here. The next was the two-finger rule at the front of the nose. So here I actually have exactly 2 fingers. This is also how it is specified. And this requirement is intended to ensure that the horse can still chew and swallow. These are 2 basic needs that we should never restrict. 2001, and it is also important that if I have the cavesson too tight, it puts pressure on the aforementioned chewing muscles. The rest of the team is coming. Okay, I would take a look at that too. All right. That means if I can't fit 2 fingers in between here, and the cavesson is therefore tighter, I will simply make it 2 holes shorter. Now there's still room for a finger. Now I have, and we'll take a closer look at this in a moment. Suddenly, a lot of pressure on the chewing muscles. And you can see that then the cavesson here can no longer react as much, and here it cannot either. So if I give a tug here now, 2001, you can stay there, that would be great. Thank you. Wild day today. Or I give a tug here at the front, when the horse stands still, as there is little movement. Now let's do it a bit further. And I'll give it when he stops briefly. Yes, everything is fine. Here is the same pulling case. Do you see how suddenly the cavesson moves much more on the nose of the horse? I'll do this again here on the inner ring. You can see how wonderfully it can also move. So, why is this so important? If I buckle the cavesson tightly, I simply reach in here again and make it tighter, which fixes the chain more on the nose of the horse, and thus it cannot move as well. And I need much coarser aids to be able to move the cavesson on the horse's nose, with the intention that at the moment the horse realizes, the cavesson is starting to move, I will go along with it. It is much easier when it is loose and the horse feels it everywhere here on the outside, where the cavesson moves, and here on the inside, it also notices, look, it goes away. So, if it is too tight, I take away one of my aids. If it is naturally too loose, it will also feel very vague in some way. This means I need to figure out for myself what kind of aids I can use in 2021, how subtle I can make them, and accordingly how tight or loose I should make the cavesson. It is clear that we do not want to restrict the horse. So that means we have our 2 fingers here. Here we have our 2.5 fingers. And how deep can the cavesson actually go down? Because there are a few things to consider here. You can feel at the front, where the tip of the skull is between the nostrils, and where it forms a small triangle at the top, with a little wing extending out from there. It is still completely closed here for him. For him, the little wing only starts down here at 2001. That means in this area, up to here, I could still place the cavesson. So we might have different horses, depending on the size of the skull. If we look at this, for example, with Regulus, it's good that you are here. When I look here, it is, stop. Is it starting here? That means when I consider the 2-finger rule here, I only have this small piece where I can place the cavesson. And with a horse that has a much larger head, like he does now, for example, I have a completely different range in which I can move. This is something to consider. With you, Hörnchen, it will be a bit tighter. Can you see him in the picture? Now I'll ask the production team. Great. With Hörnchen, you can see that when it looks like this, 2001. Look at how thick the cheek muscle is on him. This means that if I were to make the cavesson a bit tighter on him, I would completely squeeze it. And when you look at the Regulus from the front, it is, for example, much narrower in its musculature. So, we need to see how much space we have. I think you are breathing into the microphone. So how much space does the horse have exactly available on its personal skull? After that, I have to adjust accordingly. And then I can see what the horse is capable of. Can I actually work my horse at a distance with this cavesson, or will I end up pulling? If I start pulling, I might first need to check my aids, perhaps. Of course, it can always happen that the horse sometimes slips and gets startled, for example. Then it might slip a little bit for a moment. But if the horse is otherwise between the aids, it is advisable to keep the Cavesson loose enough so that all the aids we give can be received particularly finely and in detail. Do you want to be in the video too? Okay. So that means we can use the two-finger rule? Yes, in principle. But be careful to always pay attention to individual needs. And we can also say that a cavesson that is too tight prevents subtle aids, hinders swallowing, chewing, yawning, coughing, and can squeeze the musculature. If I make it too loose, that is of course also bad. Even if the cavesson is loose, it does not go into the eye as we have this cheek strap at the back. This means that if I were to pull the cavesson in this direction now, so I'm turning it now, and you can see that the middle ring is already completely on the nose, it still doesn't go into the eye here. As you can see here, it is super loosely fastened. This means it doesn't have to fit tightly. The same goes for this one. This also puts pressure on the cheek, and we naturally want to avoid that the fair has pressure points. Excuse me. So, we have one very significant difference. This cavesson is used. This one here is one of our test cavessons that you can order from our shop to try it on your horse and see if it fits. It feels quite different. Now let's switch. So, you see, down here at the ring, there is a difference. Here we already have this beautiful hang of the cavesson, which sits very nicely in the chin groove. 2001. And here it is still completely new. Here you can see it is still very straight. Could you come back one more time? That would be great. Yes, the stupid flies. I will buckle it up. Exactly the same way now. Take a look here again with your eye to ensure that it fits well. We're not going to fasten it completely right now. Well, actually, it goes quickly enough. Great. So please come back into the picture. Yes, Emma, please come along as well. Thank you. So, when you look at this cavesson from the side, it is the same size, but it is new. It sits much higher here. This means it comes from usage. And as it starts to be used, this cavesson will fit better. So if I now give my pulling aid here with the same buckling, a little less aid reaches the horse. This means that a cavesson is essentially like a good wine. When it is well used, it starts to allow the aids to pass through much better and provides a much better contact area. Yes. So in this sense, I hope that we were able to bring you closer to the beliefs regarding the fit of a cavesson here with usand, noseband, nonsense, chain, and iron. And if you have any questions about our cavesson, feel free to send me a message, and I will try to help you. And you can of course also order it as a test cavesson from me. That's not a problem at all. Then it is likely that one or exactly this cavesson will arrive for you. And you can try it out and see if it might be the right fit for you. If we want to look further into how to use this cavesson with aid giving, especially with this lower ring here, there will also be an additional video on that. Have fun.